everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. I have a really fun ink smushing card to share with you today that I created. I don't do many ink smushing cards, but I really was happy with the way this one turned out. So I'll show you the process I took and the supplies I used. So I'm using the Flora and Fauna stamp set called Unicorn Magic. This is really sweet. I used this in my previous video as well, and I have the coordinating die for that set as too. I'm using the scallop borders from Lawn Fawn, the nested scallop borders. I'll put the exact link and name in the description below. I have a piece of mixed media cardstock I'm going to use to cut my frame out with, and then just a typical A2 size folded card top down. I'm going to use the Perfectly Plaid papers from Lawn Fawn. I really like this bluish, greenish, teal plaid paper. I'm going to use that. I pulled out my color box inks, but I ended up not using these. I used some distress inks instead, but I was just kind of grabbing everything I had access to and just kind of went with it and decided as I went what I wanted to use. So I do have Peacock Feather, Mermaid Lagoon, Tumbled Glass, and then I brought in these pinks, but I didn't end up using them, Spun Sugar and Picked Raspberry. So to get started, I cut out the frame first, using those Lawn Fawn dies. Now these have holes in the scallops. They're so pretty. I love these frames. But the holes didn't just fall out immediately, so I just took a stylus and just pushed those through. They weren't attached, they just needed a little nudge. Anything you have, any tool or something, a straight pin would probably work as well. But they were super easy just to get them all popped out there. So this is mixed media cardstock, and I'm going to just tack it to my desk so that it doesn't move around when I'm doing my ink blending. And mixed media cardstock is always beautiful because it really brings out the saturation in any inks or colors, I find. And this is a sleeve protector I'm using. I've seen people use acetate as well, which looks like it would work really well. I didn't have any of that on hand, so I decided to use this sleeve protector that worked pretty good too. I have a craft palette and then just an eyedropper for water. I'm going to start with the tumbled glass. Now my tumbled glass is a little bit on the dry side, but I did start with that anyways. I got enough out of it. And then I have Peacock Feather and Mermaid Lagoon, which is, so I'm going darkest or lightest to darkest with the colors. So I'm going to drop a little water onto each of those Distress ink smushes just to get the water activating those inks. I'm coming in with a watercolor brush and just blending those together, making sure the water gets all swirled around and picking up all the ink that I smushed down on my palette. So I'm going to start with that lightest color first, the tumbled glass. I'm picking that up with my page protector sheet, and it's really flexible, the page protector is, so I'm able to really maneuver it around and create a nice application of ink. Now the one thing I notice about using the page protector is when I pick up the ink, it kind of beads onto the page protector. So when I lay that down onto my surface, my mixed media cardstock in this case, I make sure to smear it or drag it just to push the ink around off of that page protector and move it around onto the surface. And I found that worked out really well. So I did start with the lightest color and tried to push that as far to the edge as I could while still keeping some of that white border showing. I didn't want this completely covered, just that ink smushing look where it has a ragged edge where the ink ends on the edges, I guess. And then I came in with that Peacock Feather, which is really nice because it kind of complemented the blues but brought in more of the greens, which helped match the Perfectly Plaid paper from the Lawn Fawn set that I was using. And so I just kind of nudged it around and tried to create light and dark areas like watercolor typically behaves. I really wanted to have that watercolor look. And then when I was all done, I came in and just filled my water brush with a lot and just splattered for another visual texture to add to this card. Just using the same colors, splattered, concentrating in the top left, bottom right, just kind of a zigzag or a diagonal sweep across the whole artwork. And so I did just the two darker colors. The Spun Sugar, or the Tumbled Glass, I don't think you would have seen it if I put it on there. Now I'm going to come in with some gold drawing ink from Winsor & Newton. I love this stuff, and I have a video as well where I reviewed it, and I'll link that in a card so you can check that out. But the gold drawing ink is so beautiful, and it's very opaque. It holds the density of the pigment, and so it shows up really well on cards. It's great for splatter effects, and that's what I want to use it for here. Now you do have to make sure you stir this really well, it settles quickly. And so I just used the back end of my brush and got in the corners and mixed up all that pigment with the fluid that's inside. And it was ready to go, super easy. And then I did splattering with it as well, and it just looks so delicious. I love this ink, it's so pretty. And so it was a nice effect to add to the card. And considering it's unicorns, I think they need to be kind of glittery and magical, super magical looking. So it didn't take much ink of the gold ink to put down, and here you can see a close-up. It's still wet, it's got to dry, but I'm really happy with how it's looking. While I wait for that, I'm going to prepare my base first. So that's going to be putting the plaid paper onto my card base. So now I'm just going to pull out this piece of plaid paper and get it ready for adding to the card base here. I do have to apologize. I'm house sitting for my mom, and her cat is really chatty tonight. I'm not sure how much you can hear, but hopefully it's not too disruptive. I'm just putting some tape roller onto my card base, and then that plaid paper is pretty even. I took a look at the pattern and it falls equally on both sides, the line structure, and so I knew as long as I got my card base in the center of the paper on the back that it would be perfectly match up and the edges would be nice and straight that way. Now I'm just taking my cutting mat and my crafting knife and ruler and just trimming off that overhang and matching it up to the edges of my card base. And so there's a look, it's all good and finished and ready to go. So now I'm going to start building my card. I have the base part of my artwork dry. Took a look and it looks pretty good. So I set that aside while I work on the elements here. I'm going to use the unicorn from the bottom corner, and I'm stamping this with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And so this is my first time using this stamp set, so it's really fun. I love using new stamps. It's just like Christmas. So I was really excited to color this up. So now I decided to do a peach colored tone for the body of the unicorn. So I'm using YR00 here. And so I'm just coloring a wash of this all the way across the body, and then I'm going to come in with R22 and create the shadows. Now R22 is pretty dark compared to that YR00. But I'll blend those two together with that YR00 at the end once I have all my shadow colors laid down, and that should blend them a little bit better. I do like the intensity that this color will create for those shadows though. And so I'm just flicking up, just creating a soft stroke between those two colors. And then I'll come back in with that YR00 and just blend up in the same direction and bring those inks together a little bit better. I'm going to do the same at the top for the head, just putting some shadows along the bottom of the face and then around the hairline as well. And then blending the same way with my first marker. Now a little trick, I'm using my colorless blender to pick up any bleeds that went outside the artwork lines. I had a lot of trouble with this one for some reason. I don't know if I just had an off piece of paper, but just putting the colorless blender down from the outline of your artwork and then pulling away from your artwork will pull out any ink that's overhanging and just kind of wash it out or water it down, I guess, visually. So that is a trick to help if you need to clean up any lines that maybe you slipped over on. Now I'm coming in with R24, which is more of a red color, but I really wanted to intensify the deepest parts of the shadow parts of that unicorn body. So this sort of reminds me of like a peach, where the fruit, a peach, where you have that lighter color, but then you have those really intense reds in the darkest parts. And so that's kind of the idea I was thinking. Now to help clean up some of that bleeding marker as well, I just used my white gel pen to clean up around the lines for anything that didn't really get picked up well with that colorless blender. Now for the mane and the tail, I'm going to use pink. I want to use some bright pinks, but light, soft pinks as well. So I'm coming in and just putting a wash down of the lightest pink and then bringing in a couple more darker pinks. Now with the Flora and Fauna style, it's more, just the art style is very intricate and detailed, so it doesn't always leave a lot of room for detailed coloring, which can make it easier to make a card because you don't have to spend so much time focusing on the blends and the details. But also there's not a lot of room to lay down color, so it's more about just picking the colors that you want to use and just dropping in little bits of shadows here and there. It's super easy to color these stamps. I love them so much. Now I'm coloring my bluebird, which is really just a greenish, tealish bluebird, I guess. I have just a base color and then bringing a shadow up from its belly. And that's pretty much all the coloring I did for this. No detailed coloring. Again, it's a small element and it's not the main element of my card. So I didn't want to put a lot of time into it. And I'm just coming in with a bright pink just to pop up that mane a little bit more. And the fun thing about the drawing of the mane and the tail is there are very definitive color blocks or blocks of shapes in those areas that you can color them solid in different colors and alternate those colors, maybe different shades of pink, which is also really fun. I popped this through my Sizzix Big Kick machine with the coordinating dies, and I had to use painter's tape because I ran out of post-it tape. Unfortunately, I do have more purchased now, so I'm good, but I had to be very careful popping these out that I didn't rip the artwork, that they didn't stick too much. I think the cat says hello. He's pretty chatty tonight. So now I'm ready to put this together. Everything's popped out, ready to go. So I'm going to start with the card here, and I just got to stamp my sentiment last before I can put everything tacked down. So I just want to figure out placement for that. So I'm just putting the elements down, and I'm going to put the unicorn off to the left and put the sentiment on the right. So I just want to nudge things around and find spacing. And I like to do this with the stamp before I go ahead and stamp, just to make sure that I'm comfortable with the area that it's going to be in. So I'm going to very carefully move those critters off to the side and then stamp that as straight as I can. I had to pull it a little bit closer so I could get over it a little more just to get that straight. And so now it's all ready to go. And I can start building my card. So I'm going to put my artwork on foam tape just to give it that extra dimension. Just a simple few pieces around the edge and then a little piece in the middle. I always like to support the middle no matter what, just in case they're sagging or any pressure gets put on the middle, it doesn't cave in. Now I'm just going to eyeball this without my knife. I know it's shocking, but that guideline of the background is just perfect for visually measuring it and making sure it lands straight on the paper. That grid is just, the plat is a built-in grid basically. So now I'm going to put foam tape on the critters as well, and I got to cut them up in lots of little pieces just to make sure that I get all the weaker elements that need to be covered, like the legs, the tail, the head for the unicorn. And then I will use my knife to position this one just so I can make sure it's straight and in the right spot that I want it to be. And then I'll put the little bird on, just sitting on his back. Now when I got to this part, I felt that the card just needed a little more something. I came in with a light Copic, a similar blue to the Distress ink, just to create a shadow. And I like to do this to ground my elements, but I found that the Copic color was pretty light. It kind of blended into the background, but I was okay with that. I just left it as is. I came in with my gold gel pen and put some accents on my unicorn just to marry the background elements with the foreground elements. So I put some gold jelly roll pen on the unicorn horn and then some dots across his back. Now I needed a little bit more glitter or embellishment, so I came in with these stars from Recollections and just sprinkled them across the artwork. I want to keep them just inside the white container area. I don't want those on the plaid area. And so I just trailed them from the top right to the bottom left, going behind the critters and around the sentiment. And just with some craft glue, I'm just tacking those stars down, picking them up with my knife, and then flipping them over and just holding them into place while I slide my knife out. So I thought that this was the right balance of glitter. I thought I glammed it up enough and it looked pretty good, and I really, really love that gold ink in the background. It's so gorgeous. So here's a look at the finished card. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and it was really fun. I do love the ink smooshing. I don't do it enough for sure. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos. If you hit the bell as well, you'll be notified as they go live. Thank you so much for watching.